We're going to look at the question, is it wrong to use the writings of Ellen G. White in the sermon on Sabbath morning?
That's an interesting question. Who asked that question?
Well, it seems like a lot of pastors are believing that.
Adventist pastors?
I don't know whether they're taught that in school or whether they just all seem to be, not all, but many are thinking that. But notice this from 1 Corinthians 14:22. It says, tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe. So if someone can speak in tongues, the purpose of it is to help the unbeliever realize that God is working. But to them that believe not. But prophesying serveth not for them that believe not, but for them which believe. So here we have the Bible principle about the ministry of prophets. The prophet has been given a message for those that are church members, not for those that are outside the church. So obviously, if on Sabbath morning we have a lot of people, or even some people that are not Seventh-day Adventists, we have to be careful because prophecy wasn't given for them. It was given for the church, for people inside the church. Now, the reason we can use the Bible is that has come to be recognized even by non-Christian people as the source of our teaching. So we can use the Bible, but not the writings of Ellen White when we're dealing with non-Adventists. But when we're dealing with Adventists, that's who it's for. So, in Evangelism 256 says the testimonies of Sister White should not be carried to the front. And so they read that and they say, see, you shouldn't be using Ellen White in your sermon because you're not supposed to carry it to the front. But they don't read the rest. God's word is the unerring standard. The testimonies are not to take the place of the word. Great care should be exercised by all believers to advance these questions carefully and always stop when you have said enough. Let all prove their positions from the scriptures and substantiate every point they claim as truth from the revealed Word of God. Now, obviously, this is talking about evangelistic work, and we are not to quote Sister White to the non-Adventist Bible study contact or use her writings in our evangelistic meetings. Although I noticed, Mark Finley, when he did the 1995 doing the first satellite evangelistic meeting, he did quote from Sister White in some of the later talks, but he did not say that she was an inspired writer. He made no reference to that idea. He simply read the beautiful quote from her and left the rest, out. And I think there are times when that is appropriate, but generally speaking, we need to prove all our points from the Bible to those that are not Seventh-day Adventists. Another one on this topic, 5th Testimony 669. The first number of the testimonies ever published contains a warning against the injudicious use of the light which is thus given to God's people. I stated that some had taken an unwise course when they had talked their faith to unbelievers and the proof had been asked for, they had read from my writings. So that was very unwise, and it makes people think we're a cult because we are quoting from Ellen White to prove our teachings. Instead of going to the Bible for proof, it was shown me that this course was inconsistent and would prejudice unbelievers against the truth. The testimonies can have no weight with those who know nothing of their spirit. They should not be referred to in such cases. So until someone has the opportunity to listen to the evidence I've been giving you so that they can accept Ellen White as a prophet, we should not use her writings with them. Because, in a sense, what we're doing is we're saying this is an inspired writer, and they don't have the evidence to prove that she is an inspired writer, and that's not really fair. And they're liable to be prejudiced against it, and of course some are violently prejudiced against it. Now, having said that, as I mentioned on Sabbath morning, we often do have non-Adventists present. And I think we need to become more careful than what we have been. People like to say things like an inspired author said. That's not good with a non-Adventist. You haven't given them the proof that she's inspired, and we shouldn't say that she's an inspired author. It probably would be best not to say our favorite author, because a lot of people know who that is when you say our favorite author. There are various phrases that we use, and the same principle would apply to Sabbath school class. Sometimes I cringe because we have some non-Adventists coming to our church. Excuse me.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I have trouble with some drainage. So every once in a while it gets in the way of my speaking. And, as I listen to the different members making comments, and of course our Sabbath school lesson uses her prophecy some, but the way they refer to it, I think, ooh, that person's not ready. I think that's why in some churches the pastor has a class where he can keep that from happening and invite the non-Adventists to his class. But really all of our classes should be able to not refer to her inspiration. The Adventists know she's inspired. We don't have to tell them. And the non-Adventists, it'd be better not to tell them yet till they've heard our reasons. The testimonies can have no weight with those who know nothing of their spirit. They should not be referred to in such cases. Now, what can you do when non-SDAs are present? Well, I've already talked about the introductory statement there. Don't use expressions that suggest the material is inspired, such as an inspired author, from the pen of inspiration, from our favorite author, from the spirit of prophecy. Try to weed those things out of your comments if you know, or even if you think maybe there's a non-Adventist present. We need to weed it out. But it is still possible to use her writings, simply referring to the book You don't say it's an inspired book, you just read from the book. However, we need to prove all of our main points right out of the Bible and use her writings as supporting material or expansion of the point, so that the person who has at least somewhat logical mind realizes, well, that fits with what the Bible said, and we can use it that way, but just not using these different ways of referring to it. So you can just say the name of the book and the page, or you can even read the quote but don't say where it came from. I was having a worship in the parlor at our lifestyle center, and I read some beautiful passages from Steps to Christ. I didn't say where I got it from, I just read it. And afterward, a lady came up to me and she said, "Where did you get that? That was beautiful." Well, then I shared with her, where you got it from. So we need to use one of those two methods when there are non-Adventists around. In Review and Herald of April 19, 1906, says the Lord permits the present condition of things to exist in order that those who have had an experience in proclaiming the truth may now rehearse the past experience of God's servants, and notice what it says next, and bring to the front the testimonies that are more valuable than gold. Obviously, she's talking about her own writings. So, there is a place like here in class, and when we know that we're all Seventh-day Adventists at present, there is a time to bring her writings to the front, but not in places where there are non-Adventists. Yes.
I think that's so interesting because I know on Sabbath in particular, there are always, well, at my church back home, there are always visitors there, and sometimes there are non-Adventists, right? But hearing like when a pastor go up and he doesn't say any spirit of prophecy quotes, when church is over, the members start to mumble like, it's like we're going away from spirit of prophecy, we don't want you to say that she's inspired, or they might just do what you say and just quote the book and they say, oh, they're not saying that it's a inspirational or it comes from, she's a prophetess, like, and some of the members have a problem with that, like they want to hear those terminologies.
Well, so, probably, the pastor probably needs to teach the church some of this material, because if he has non-Adventists present and he chooses not to use Ellen White, even reading it without giving the quote, which I don't think you have to be that strict just because they're non-Adventists there, but if he chooses to do it that way, he should explain to them so they don't think he's not a believer in Ellen White. Yeah. And then at like a prayer meeting, he can use the spirit of prophecy at the prayer meeting when we're all Adventists there. Here's another one from Evangelism 255. As the end draws near, I think we all agree that the end is near, right? And the work of giving the last warning to the world extends, it becomes more important for those who accept present truth to have a clear understanding of the nature and influence of the testimonies, which God in His providence has linked with the work of the third angel's message from its very rise. As soon as we started giving the third angel's message, we had a prophet, because we needed the prophet to help us be able to give the message in the fullness. And so There is a time when we need to instruct Seventh Day Adventists very deeply in the spirit of prophecy, and that's what we're trying to do in schools like this, to give you a wide knowledge of the spirit of prophecy. Another question that comes up, will there be another prophet like Ellen G. White? Now again, this is not a quote from Ellen White, but this is what M.N. Campbell claims that she told him. And because it agrees with what I've read in her writings, I think he put it down right. I asked if, in the event of the Lord's calling her to her rest, another person was likely to be raised up to take her place. Several of her books were lying on the writing table attached to her chair. She spread her hands over them and said that in those books was outlined the information needed by our people for the rest of the journey. That is as far as she felt free to go in answering my question. So she had the Bible in the middle, and she had her books surrounding the Bible, and she indicated that in the Bible plus her writings, we have everything we need to make it to heaven. And I believe that that is a correct understanding or correct report of what she may have said to him. Let's see, wait a minute. Okay, next we're going to look at certain objections that people have had about her writings and what her answer was to those objections. Here's one that keeps on going. Well, Ellen White said she was not a prophet. I don't know if you've ever heard that. First Selected Messages 31 and 2. Some have stumbled over the fact that I said I did not claim to be a prophet, and they have asked, why is this? I have no claims to make, only that I am instructed that I am the Lord's messenger. Now, let me ask you, is there any difference between a prophet and the Lord's messenger? It's really not. That he called me in my youth to be his messenger, to receive his word, and to give a clear and decided message in the name of the Lord.
So if there's no, which I know that there's no difference, but since there's no difference, that the sentence itself sounded contradictory, where she says, I have not claimed to be a prophet, except that he has called me to be a messenger. But since they're the same thing, why is she saying, I do not claim to be a prophet, but yet I am called to be a prophet? That's practically what it sounds like she's saying.
Yeah. It explains it, I think, a little bit farther here, but when a person says they're a prophet, so many people have been exposed to false prophets that it makes them tend to reject her. So she preferred the title messenger, not prophet. Why have I not claimed to be a prophet? Because in these days many who boldly claim that they are prophets are a reproach to the cause of Christ. And because my work includes much more than the word prophet signifies. So she gives two reasons why she does not claim to be a prophet. Notice she doesn't say, I am not a prophet. She doesn't say that. She says, I've never made the claim to be a prophet. And now she gives two reasons why she'd never claimed to be a prophet. First of all, the word prophet has a bad ring to most people. Second, that is a portion of her work, but she had a much larger work than what prophets normally do. And she's going to, well, maybe I didn't put that in. This is now one by Willie White, her son, and it's recorded in the 5th volume of the biography on her life. That 6-volume set where they've written about her whole entire life. When she spoke these words, she had in mind the ideas of the people regarding a prophet as one whose chief office was to predict events. And she wanted them to understand that that was not her place in the world. Well, that could be true. I don't know for sure. She doesn't give that as a reason. Here she's giving some information about why she considers her work broader than the prophet's work. First selected message is 33. In connection with my husband, I was to be a medical missionary worker. If you've ever read of some of the incurable cases that got healed in her home, she ran a small sanitarium sometimes, not all the time, but it's amazing what the Lord did through her. She wasn't a doctor, but every case that I read about, the person got well, even when the regular doctors had given them up as hopeless. I was to set an example to the church by taking the sick to my home and caring for them. I was also to speak on the subject of Christian temperance. So she went all over the world giving lectures on, giving health talks, you might say, and calling for temperance and so on. That's not what you usually think a prophet's work is, but the Lord did give her that work to do. On the same page, I was instructed that I must ever urge upon those who profess to believe the truth the necessity of practicing the truth. So that was kind of the work of a pastor, that she was to urge, not just deliver the message from the Lord, but to urge Adventists to live by the message that God had given. I was charged not to neglect or pass by those who were being wronged. I was especially charged to protest against any arbitrary or overbearing action toward the ministers of the gospel by those having official authority. We don't have her help anymore, and there are some ministers that get really mistreated by the officials. But she was called by God that if she knew of that, or if some pastor came to her and told her what they did to him and it wasn't fair, she was to go to the conference leaders and tell them, they were in the wrong, or at least find out what they did from their side, and to try to correct it. After my marriage, I was instructed that I must show a special interest in motherless and fatherless children, taking some under my own charge for a time, and then finding homes for them. Thus, I would be giving others an example of what they could do. So here we have quite a few things that God revealed to her that she was supposed to do. And you can imagine she had a busy life doing those things on top of her work as a messenger. To claim to be a prophetess is something that I have never done. If others call me by that name, I have no controversy with them. It's kind of like saying, I am a prophet. I just don't like to use that term to refer to myself. My commission embraces the work of a prophet. So in other words, it includes the work of a prophet, but it does not end there. It embraces much more than the minds of those who have been sowing the seeds of unbelief can comprehend. So if we read everything, we will find when she said, I am not a prophet, or I don't claim, I quoted it wrong. When she said, I do not claim to be a prophet, she's simply saying, I prefer not to use that terminology. But if somebody's going to say you're not a prophet, yes, I am a prophet. I like the word messenger better, but really there's no difference in somebody that's a messenger for God and somebody that's a prophet. There's been an accusation that Ellen White withheld some of her writings when she reprinted her visions. And I suppose the suggestion is that she found out something she wrote was not right, and therefore she didn't want to republish it when the next time came. So this is a very subtle undermining of her work. First Selected Messages, page 60, she said, when my earliest views were first published in pamphlet form, the edition was small and was soon sold. This was, in a few years, followed by a larger book, The Christian Experience and Views of Mrs. E.G. White, printed in 1851 and containing much additional matter. As, time went by, she wrote more fully about a lot of things. In fact, the conflict series that we have right now has come to us in several forms before. We have spiritual gifts. There's 2 books, and each book has 2 volumes. Then we have what's called the Spirit of Prophecy set, and it's 4 volumes. And then that one was written especially for Seventh-day Adventists. And the conflict series, which is the 5 books, were written especially for non-Adventists and to be sold by our colporteurs to non-Adventists. Well, she left out one chapter on the Sabbath that was in the 4 volume set. And, someone might accuse her, well, why did you leave that chapter out? But you have to realize that she hit the Sabbath in the 5 volume set, but she didn't want to hit it quite that hard because it was to go to a lot of non-Adventists. So, each one, though, expands, and there's a lot of details in the 5 volume set that's not in the smaller versions.
Do you remember what that little area of the chapter you said? Was removed or paragraph?
Yeah, it was the whole chapter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
and it tells some stories of Sabbath keepers during the Reformation period, and what happened to them and how they stood up for the Sabbath and how the other Protestants persecuted them, and so on. It's very interesting on the Sabbath. In our frequent change of location in the earlier history of the publishing work, and then in almost incessant travel, as I have labored from Maine to Texas, from Michigan to California, and I have crossed the plains no less than 17 times, I lost all trace of the first published works. When it was decided to publish early writings at Oakland last fall, we were obliged to send to Michigan to borrow a copy of Experience and Views. And in doing this, we supposed that we had obtained an exact copy of the earliest visions as first published. This we reprinted, as stated in the preface to early writings, with only verbal changes from the original work. And here I will pause to state that any of our people having in their possession a copy of any or all of my first views as published prior to 1851 will do me a great favor if they will send them to me without delay. Now, that could raise other questions like, well, why didn't God tell her that she didn't have it all? Well, we can ask God that someday, why he didn't tell her. But we can't blame her, because she's dependent on God, and if he doesn't tell her something, then she can't pass it on, and apparently it's not important. That's why he didn't tell her. However, you can see her attitude. She's not hiding anything that's ever been written. She is encouraging that if there's anything she's written that hasn't been republished, tell me about it, give me a copy, and we'll make sure it gets published. I promise to return the same as soon as a copy can be produced. So far from desiring to withhold anything that I have ever published, I would feel great satisfaction in giving to the public every line of my writings that has ever been printed. So she's not hiding anything, because it all was what God revealed to her. Here's an accusation that probably doesn't come up as much as it used to, but those that are trying to dig up the dirt, they will certainly dig this one up. Ellen White was accused of teaching that the door of mercy was closed forever in 1844. So she had to answer that. First selected messages, 63. For a time after the disappointment in 1844, I did hold in common with the Advent body that the door of mercy was then forever closed to the world. So she said, yes, there was a period of time, but if you stop and think about it, if God didn't tell her different, we can't really blame her for believing that. This position was taken before my first vision was given me. It was the light given me of God that corrected our error and enabled us to see the true position. So she said, yes, I did believe that, but God saw that it needed to be corrected, so he gave me a vision that helped me to see that that was not true. I am still a believer in the shut door theory, but not in the sense in which we at first employed the term, or in which it is employed by my opponents. As you know, in Revelation, it says that in 1844, the door to the holy place was shut, and the door to the most holy place was opened, and that people would try to close the door that had been opened, and they would try to open the door that had been closed. And that truly has happened, but her teaching, based on what God revealed to her, became correct once God unfolded that to her. I was shown in vision, and I still believe that there was a shut door in 1844. All who saw the light of the first and second angels' messages and rejected that light were left in darkness. Okay, so anybody that rejected the first angel or the second angel could not benefit from the light coming from the most holy place. Now, this is a serious message for us as Seventh-day Adventists. If we reject the ministry of the early rain, we will not be able to accept the ministry of the latter rain. So it's very important. And right now, the early rain is being poured out. And we need to be receiving it, because if we reject that, we will not be able to receive the latter rain. And those who accepted it and received the Holy Spirit, which attended the proclamation of the message from heaven, and who afterward renounced their faith and pronounced their experience a delusion, thereby rejected the Spirit of God, and it no longer pleaded with them. So yes, there was a shut door, but not to the world, not to the people who hadn't heard, and not to the people, of course, who had accepted the first and second angel's message. That door was not shut for them. But there was many people that the door was shut for them. Those who did not see the light had not the guilt of its rejection. It was only the class who had despised the light from heaven that the Spirit of God could not reach. Another one, the false claim that Ellen White knew the day and hour of Jesus' coming. First Selected Messages, 75 and 6. Do you, Ellen G. White, claim that in your original testimonies, Volume 1, which they have preserved, you distinctly declare that you were shown the day and hour of Christ's second coming? Their argument is that this statement of yours will not stand the Bible test, as Christ himself declares that no man knoweth the day or the hour, no, not even the angels of God. And I'm sure they think, we got her this time. The sky opened and shut and was in commotion. The mountains shook like a reed in the wind and cast out, it should be, ragged rocks all around. The sea boiled like a pot and cast out stones upon the ground. And as God spoke the day and hour of Jesus' coming and delivered the everlasting covenant to his people, he spoke one sentence and then paused, while the words were rolling through the earth. So she was watching in vision, and she heard the day and the hour of Jesus' coming announced. And that's, of course, the first time that the day and hour of his coming will be announced. I have not the slightest knowledge as to the time spoken by the voice of God. I heard the hour proclaimed but had no remembrance of that hour after I came out of Israel. So God made her forget it. She heard it, but he made her forget it so that she couldn't tell us. Now next I want to take a look, in the light of what we have studied so far, at some of the comments that have been made about what kind of inspiration she had. And we're going to question them. Are they correct? This one was written by Francis M. Wilcox. He, of course, has passed away now. He was, I think he may have passed away even before I came on the scene. His name is somewhat familiar to me because he's written some books. He said, the works of Mrs. Ellen G. White constitute an inspired commentary upon the scriptures and the plan of salvation. Now, I think that's a pretty good description. What I've done in my syllabuses that are over there in the Sabbath school area, I've taken the whole book of Deuteronomy. I have gone verse by verse and added quotations by Ellen White to explain the verse. And it's incredible. In fact, when I first did it, I was thinking of trying to sell it in the Book of Bible Houses. And I sent it to the White Estate. And they got back a letter and they said, we didn't realize there was so much in her writings about the book of Deuteronomy. But when I tried to be able to sell it in the Book of Bible Houses, they said no. So I haven't been able to. And I've done the first 30 chapters of Isaiah that way, the first 8 chapters of Romans, the whole book of Galatians, because I noticed that we don't, in general, use her writings as a commentary upon the scriptures. And of course, she really expands the knowledge about the plan of salvation also. So I think he's correct there. They constitute the ablest help in the study of the Bible of any commentary in existence. So he's saying, her writings are better commentary than any of the other ones that have been written, including the Seventh-day Adventist commentary. We have that 8-volume set or 10-volume set of comments on the Bible. But I have discovered some of the comments are wrong. They're not all 100% correct, but you won't find anything incorrect in her comments on the Bible. So if we go back far enough, to people that maybe lived during the time of Ellen White, or at least had the correct understanding, they give us some pretty good statements. Here's Jan Andrews. While therefore the Bible recognizes the gifts of the Spirit, these are not given to supersede the Bible, nor yet to fill the same place as the Bible. Well, that's pretty obvious as well. It's simply a further expansion of the Bible and commentary on the Bible, but it's not to replace the Bible. We don't set the Bible aside to just study her writings. Now, some self-supporters have made the mistake of preaching sermons based 100% on the writings of Ellen White. And they don't use any Bible to show that what they're teaching is based on the Bible. So that isn't a good practice either. It gives the impression that her writings supersede or replace the Bible. Now, some of them tried to give an illustration that would help us to understand how does the Bible relate to the writings of Ellen White. This one's from Uriah Smith. Suppose we are about to start upon a voyage. The owner of the vessel gives us a book of directions, telling us that it contains instructions sufficient for our whole journey, and that if we will heed them, we shall reach in safety our port of destination. Setting sail, we open our book to learn its contents. We find that its author lays down general principles to govern us in our voyage and instructs us as far as practicable touching the various contingencies that may arise till the end. Now, if you're thinking about what he's really saying, you realize he's describing the Bible. That's the purpose of the Bible. But he also tells us that the latter part of our journey will be especially perilous, that the features of the coast are ever changing by reason of quicksands and tempests. But for this part of the journey, says he, I have provided you a pilot who will meet you and give you such directions as the surrounding circumstances and dangers may require. And to him you must give heed. With these directions we reach the perilous time specified, and the pilot, according to promise, appears. And he's saying this pilot was Ellen White. But some of the crew, as he offers his services, rise up against him. We have the original book of directions, say they, and that is enough for us. And boy, are people saying that today. Many are saying, we don't need the writings of Ellen White. We have the Bible. We stand upon that, and that alone. We want nothing of you who now heed that original book of directions. See? The book of directions said there's coming a pilot. So actually they're denying the Bible when they reject Ellen White. Who now heed that original book of directions? Those who reject the pilot or those who receive him? As that book instructs them, judge ye. Well, I think it's obvious that if we accept the Bible, we will accept the prediction in the book of Malachi that said that in the time when Jesus would return to earth, there would be an Elijah prophet. And so if Ellen White is not the Elijah prophet, we have to find somebody else. But I believe she is the Elijah prophet that the Bible spoke about. And Uriah Smith takes that and says it's like a harbor pilot. You know, the captain that directs the ship across the ocean is not the one that brings it into the harbor. The one that brings it in the harbor is the harbor pilot, because things are changing all the time, and the one that takes it across the ocean would maybe run it into something that he didn't know was there. Now, that illustration has its limitations, I believe. It almost sounds like we set aside the Bible and we just go by Ellen White, and that is not true. But it does illustrate something very important, I believe, if you take the illustration correctly.